Okay, so today we're going to look at how to complete the Layout 1 assignment. We should have InDesign open, which I do here, and we're going to go ahead on how to set it up and some of the basics. So we're going to do a new file to start with. And with this one, so the set size for this project is 8 inches by 8 inches. If you have the start screen like I do and can't change it over to picas, from picas to inches, then just make sure to type the actual 8 space IN. We also want to set the number of pages up here to 6. Since there's 6 pages required in the project, we want to uncheck the facing pages here. And then we will set the number of columns according to the assignment up to 8 and the gutter to 0.125 inches. Again, because this one defaults to picas, make sure you actually type in the inch or else it'll reset itself. And the margins, we want all of them set to 0. If you have the little lock depressed, so the dark is around it, you should be able to do 1 and it'll change all of them. Once we have those settings taken care of, we can go ahead and click OK, and this will create our document with 6 pages in it. As a note, facing pages are used when you do a regular publication because you want 2 pages, like when you open a book, to be looking at each other. So now we have half of our required columns here. If we scroll through, we have 6 pages all with the same columns. But we need to put horizontal guides in place also. So I'm going to come over here on the right hand side. There's a palette called Pages. This is a really useful palette to get used to in InDesign. You won't see anything like this in Illustrator, so it'll look a little different. And you'll see a little mock-up here of each page. As we add content, there'll be sort of a thumbnail version of that too. But we want to do this, we could do it manually on each page, but that's not super efficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually double click on this part here that says A Master. That's going to take me into the master page. When you apply something to a master page, it'll be applied to any page with that master attached to it. So you'll notice all of our pages have A's on them, so anything we do here in the A master will apply there. You can add multiple master pages, which you may want to do if you ever go into publication, but for now we just need one. So I'm going to come up here to Layout and go to Create Guides. In here, we can add rows now. So we've added our columns. We're going to add our rows, 8, and again, 0.125 inches for our gutter. So gutter is the space here, we notice, with the columns between them. Just gives us a little break so text isn't right on top of each other. We could have also just created guides instead of doing formal columns here, but why not do it on the start page? One less thing to do later. So now you'll see we have guides and columns. I want to go back out to my first page. I don't want to add content to the master page because, like I said, it'll add it to every page. And we can know that we're on what page we're on. If we look down here in the bottom left, we see A Master. This is also a place you could select a page if you want to. Or you can do like I did before, which is just double click up here on the page I want to go to. I now know I'm on page 1 because down here in the bottom left it says page 1. As simple as that. If you want to change from picas, the fastest way to do it up here in the menu bar, if you have right click enabled on your computer, you can right click or you can control click, just select inches, and now your menu is in inches. Something else I want to note here, these purple and like blue turquoisey lines don't actually print on your page. They are just guidelines there. You can turn them on and off by doing Command and the semicolon colon key. If you're on a PC, Control and the semicolon colon key. But that'll allow you to see sort of what it looks like or what it would print like, and then use the guides to do your alignment. So the next step is we need to put a couple text options on here. So I'm going to come over here to my type tool and select that. And then, so in Illustrator, you can do type two ways, but in InDesign, you have to do a text box. So I'm going to start by drawing my text box. And these guidelines aren't just here for show. You should use them as sort of placement pieces. So I'm going to do something like this is a headline. We don't necessarily care what text you use. We're just trying to put some text in place and get an idea. And then, so we are using Minion Pro or Minion. If you don't have Pro, it should be installed on your machine. If you have no version of Minion installed, ask your instructor and they can assist you. And then I have some options available to me. I'm going to pick bold here. So we remember from before, just like in Illustrator, there's a control panel here across the top. And it gives us options based on what tool we're in. I'm in the text tool, so it gives me text options. It gives me a lot more detailed ones than Illustrator does because InDesign is meant for putting text in. So what I want to do here, I've selected bold. I talked a little bit in the last video about how you can't just pick and say there's no italic or bold button. So you do need to check the drop down if you want to use different versions. And then for headlines, we usually say headlines are at least 24 point tall. Probably 30 is the smallest you'll see. I think I'm going to select 60. If when you select the size like I just did and it disappears, it hasn't actually disappeared. It just means it takes up more space than the text box. We can also tell that by the little red plus here, which allows us, if we did need more room, to move it to a different space. So I'm just going to expand my box until I get enough space to put it in place, okay? If I decided, for example, oh, this is bigger than what I really wanted, I can type in a value. I can use the arrows just like in Illustrator. I'm going to make it a little smaller so it fits within my column space. The next thing I want to do, I'm required to have a subhead for the assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and type something for this. Okay, so subhead, think of it like in a magazine article, a newspaper article. It's the text that's still larger than the rest of the text, but smaller than the headline. Usually you'll find anywhere from 14 to up to about that 24. I usually like a 16 to 18 usually works pretty well for my purposes. You can determine, you have to think about the relationship of everything on your particular page. And again, I'm going to use guidelines to put this in place. Right now, I'm just sort of playing with it and trying to figure it out. You'll also notice it may put these blue boxes around everything, which are annoying. They show up even if we turn off our guidelines. If you want to turn those off, I usually turn them off right away. We come up to View, Extras, Hide Frame Edges. You can also remember the shortcut key, but I'll be honest, I usually still go up here and click on it. So now those ugly blue boxes only show up if I have my object selected, in which case I want it. The last thing I want to do is I need to put in paragraph text. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a box for that. I'll just make it big right now, and then I can always tweak it later. And for this, instead of actually typing myself, I'm going to go up to Type, Fill with Placeholder Text, and it'll put what's called lorem ipsum in there, and we'll fill the space so that I don't have to type anything. And you can make the determination. I mean, it's all nonsense, so just decide where you want your paragraphs to be, how long you want them to be, and go from there. 2 sentences, though, is not a paragraph. And it will just fill based on the amount of space you've allotted. So with paragraph text, or body text as it's usually called, we want, usually 12 point is the absolute largest, although you usually don't see 12 point. We would usually 9 or 10 point is the most common size. So decide what works best for you and select that. And the nice part with Illustrator and text boxes or InDesign text boxes is that we can reflow this. So this is why if you're doing publications, people love it, because I can say, oh, I want my column now to be too wide, and then I can click on that little plus. I'll get this little piece here, you notice, that looks sort of like a page icon, and I can see text. I can click and it'll fill. And then I can expand and alter, and if I decide, oh, I really want them even, that makes more sense, I can do that, and it just automatically reflows, which is probably the best part about this program. So I can decide kind of how I want this. If you don't like these sort of hyphenations, we could force it to go into force with a return, or I can come up here. I'm right now in character for type. I can go to paragraph, and there's a hyphenate button, and that will force it automatically to not do hyphenation. I usually like turning it off because I'm not a fan of a ton of hyphenation, but it's up to you and what your preference is. It's kind of, if you want to think of it, for those of you that are journalism majors and hear about the Oxford comma, it's a preference. What is your particular preference on the subject? So you can keep playing with things until you get them kind of where you want them. The point of this assignment is to play with layout and to try different things. You might even try, italic versus bold. This maybe you'll try in one italic, but in other ones it'll be regular. That's up to you as to what you want to do. You can also add some basic shapes to sort of represent where you might put a picture. So perhaps in here, I'll come over here on my left-hand bar, the rectangle tool, and I'll put something that approximates a picture in. It may default like this to just having a stroke. You can come over here to the color or the swatches. You can swap it using the little double arrow thing, just like Illustrator. We usually don't put things that are sort of fill in for pictures full black, so I might take it down to like 30% gray. And that's a stand-in for a picture. We do not want to put actual pictures in this assignment. So this might not be the sort of perfect layout right now because we can see, we're leaving kind of an awkward gap here, but just as a way to show you how to put everything on the page. You could then, if you're happy with, you finished one layout and you need to go to work on the next one, you could copy this so you don't have to retype it. Because while each layout needs to be different, you can use the same starting elements for them. So I'm going to use Command-C or Control-C on a PC to copy. Turn back on my guidelines, come down to the next one. I make sure to click on the page and that it actually says 2, otherwise it can paste back on 1. And then I paste it. And then I can play with it and maybe, make the headline bigger, make it smaller, change the italics. Have some fun with this and really think about layout, think about balance, think about how it works on the page. And then what your sizes are. Do you make this bigger? Do you make it smaller? The goal with this assignment is to try out different layout elements and really get a good understanding of how layout works. And I might decide here, so the space between these two lines is a little large and awkward. My professor in college would say you could drive a truck through it. So I'm going to come up here and just adjust the leading. So that's the space between lines, and make this smaller. And don't be afraid, even if the font defaults to 1, to try something else. That's perfectly okay. And that's what we want you to do. Don't make them necessarily so tight you can't do anything else, but work with it and play with it here. But yeah, you can just keep playing, see what works. Illustrator, or InDesign like Illustrator, will automatically kind of try to line stuff up for you. You can see, and then we could put maybe this one, we were going to have a series of pictures. And you'll also notice this wants to snap. So try to work with that. I'm holding the Option key when I'm moving this. Shift isn't as important in here as it was in the Illustrator assignment because it wants to automatically snap to the guides. So this layout's a little bit more balanced than this previous one that leaves sort of this awkward space that feels like something's missing. So you're going to want to think about that and kind of play with things. You also could do what's called a text draft if you're interested. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these again and paste them on this page. So let's say I decided to put like a circle image in here. So I'm going to come over here, just like in Illustrator, anything that has this little triangle here, we're going to click and hold. We'll get other options. We select ellipse because that's what they call it, since you can make ovals and circles. I'm going to hold Shift and create my circle. And just for the sake of things, make it the right size. And then I can put the circle sort of wherever I want it in the text. And then I can go and play with text draft. Now it will sometimes show up, but the easiest way is to come up here to Window, Type, and it's above Type, text draft. And then we have the options here. And you can see there's little icons, wraparound bounding box, wraparound shape. Wraparound shape is probably more accurate since this is a circle. If we selected wraparound bounding box, you'll notice it's adhering to the box around the circle, not the circle. It will look nicer against the circle. And then we can come here and we can play with, hey, how far do we want to space this? And it'll allow you to keep adjusting until you have a good amount of spacing. Try to work on getting it consistent. It's a little harder with a circle than it is with a box, because if on a box one way is moving more than the other, you can keep playing with it until you get kind of what you want. But yeah, that's how you could wrap. So text wrap is a perfectly acceptable option too for this assignment if it makes sense with your layout. What you want to focus on is basic design principles, balance, how repetition, how you're distributing elements, how your proportion of elements is. A successful layout should have some sense of balance, some sense of either symmetry or asymmetry, and a good sense of proportion. Nothing should sort of dominate everything else. They should work together. So that is how you can get your Illustrator or your InDesign assignment started for Layout 1. Let's go ahead and save it. So we can come up to File, Save, or we can get in the habit of doing Command S, Control S on a PC. We would name this by our last name, and then Layout 1 Project, and it will automatically default to InDesign. I will just save this to the desktop for right now, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And it's now saved it. You'll also see a locked file. While you're working on it, it kind of locks the document so no one else could open it. Doesn't matter when you're on your own computer, but if you're in a company and you're working off of a server, that's helpful to keep somebody else out of your document. But that locked document isn't anything usable. It's just to protect the document. When you are ready to send us this assignment, you want to come up here to go to File and Package. And this is going to pull any fonts, any images, etc. When you get to Layout 2, this will tell you if you're using RGB images instead of CMYK. It'll give you little yellow triangles if there's any problems. We go further to actually hit the Package button. The instructions don't really matter to us, but if you were sending this to a printer, you would probably fill out all the information so they know how to get in touch with you. Click Continue. And then it's going to create a folder. It's going to default to my desktop. You'll notice it copies fonts except for the type kit because we'd have access, link graphics, and it updates the links. It also will put an IDML file, which means if somebody has an older version of InDesign, they can still open it. This is especially helpful if you're sending files out to people, and a PDF. So everything is in there and it's defaulting to high quality PDF. So if you do this, you should have everything you need to put to your instructor. Just click package, just say okay. It's gonna say, hey, you can't just give people fonts, but for this purpose it's fine. And it'll go ahead and process. Your original file is still here, but now you have a folder that allows you to, that has all the document fonts. If we'd had linked images, it would also have those. And then it has your file and a PDF version. So it's done basically all the work for you. When you go to print this, you want to send the PDF version. This can be printed on the kiosk in Anderson Hall because it's only 8 inches by 8 inches. A regular standard piece of paper is 8.5 by 11. You may want to then put crop marks so you can cut it to size, and we can help you with that if you need to. But that's how you get started with the layout assignment. And talk to your instructor, whoever's staffing the lab, if you have any other questions.